hope I'm doing it right. I
Mm-hmm.
think we're live, Chris.
It says we're live.
Yes. Hi, everyone. We are back after a long, long, long break. Chris has been keeping himself very pleasantly busy. And before we go on to start anything else, I see that we are still kind of, hey, Steph.
Hello.
Um, okay. See, as I'm speaking, I lose track of my own thoughts, but it's okay. I know you all understand.
Trust me, it happens.
That happens. I mean, as I'm speaking, and then I'm trying to make up stuff to kind of connect the sentence, but I'm going to be honest, I lost my trail of thought. But I really wanted to ask Chris today. He shared an update with me regarding him publishing another book. And I'm really excited to see that. So I would like, Chris, if you don't mind, can you share it with, whoever sees this video as well?
This is a physical copy of Alfie Smith, the Speed Cuber, my first illustrated children's book, and it's absolutely magical seeing and actually holding this in my hands. And I'm not just seeing my characters illustrated; I can actually touch the illustrations, and yeah, I've been taking these to the last couple of cubing tournaments I've been going to, and I particularly like the fact that it's known as quote the book. Isn't it? People don't say, "Oh, is that Alfie Smith's Speed Cube?" They say, "Oh, that's the book." It's like the
That's the
definitive
book.
fictional book about cubing. Yeah, and so
Hey, Chris, if it's not a
yeah, just
sneak
love them.
peek, could you show your illustration in the book?
Well, it's not so much my illustrations, and I did not draw it, but it is an illustration of me. Even if I very sneakily sneaked myself into my own book.
Hey,
Because
that's
I
legit.
wrote, as well as the words I wrote, the illustration brief as in, please put this picture at this specific part of the page and have it look like this and so on, and reference photos and things as well, including reference photos of every time a cube appears in the book. Because one thing that annoys us cubers is that every time you see, like, for example, a T-shirt with a Rubik's Cube on it, the color scheme is always wrong, or it's always in an impossible position. You've got a white tile and a yellow tile next to each other, which cannot happen on a cube and so on. So I thought, okay, if there's one place where this needs to be got right, it's here. So every time a cube appears in the book, it's been accompanied by a photo that I've taken of a cube in that position. And the illustrator, very talented, by the way, his name's Tim Stringer. He's also autistic. HarperCollins were very good with representation, like Autism Book with autistic author, autistic illustrator, and as well as being very, very good at what he does. And coincidentally, having the same uh, same illustration style as the mental image in my head of what the book was going to look like. Um, yeah, his attention to detail was excellent, and every copy of the cube, each cube in the book is perfect. And he wasn't bad at drawing me either. And I've just seen Steph's comments, and
Ew,
yeah.
I'm so
Oh, hello,
excited.
Matthew. Pleasure to see you. Right. So, in answer to Steph's question, this is the first story I've written in about 10 years with a body count of 0.
Oh my God, Chris,
Yeah,
that.
I know I'm giving a few spoilers, but no one dies in Alfie Smith's Speed Cube. It's not like Underdogs where there's a death in the first chapter.
Well, when I started reading Underdogs, I wasn't expecting it to be that heavy. And as I started reading, there was one
And the
chapter,
first one
I
was that
don't
heavy.
remember which chapter was that. That actually gave me palpitations. I was like, oh my God, I need to close the book and put it on a side for a moment. But yeah, it is
There's a
exciting.
friend of mine who still hasn't got past chapter 12. Chapter 12 is the one where they're running around the citadel when they're clearly going to get trapped before the whole Ewan breaking into the inner city thing. And yeah, he said pretty much the same thing as you, except he has not been able to pick up the copy again because, yeah, it's the kind of feedback that if I were a bad person, I could brag about that. It's like, ooh, my writing is so intense it gives people palpitations. But I should just feel really guilty.
No, don't do that. I mean, in this instance, I'd like you to feel glad about it because I'm very proud of you.
Thank you. I do like it when people swear at me and throw the books across the room, though. That's an achievement. But if
Hey, I'm
people
going to do
actually
this
commit some level of harm, then
next time. Next time something like this happens, I'm going to do that. Try doing that. Well, okay, before we officially start the book reading, there are a couple of updates regarding Kind Theory that I'd like to share. We are wrapping up our Nourish Diversity session. I think it's sixth session. It's coming up soon. That's going to be the last session for the program. So if you guys have not had a chance to access a program, please do that. Steph, after the updates, we're going to have a recap from Chris because, to be honest, I need a recap too. It's been a very long time. And then there have been some changes to our BSSC safety program. So um, keep your eye out for the updates regarding that program. And I'm losing my words, but as I say, English is not my first language. So if I make any errors, please forgive me. And Chris, I think we can start with the recap. I need the recap too.
oh, yes, absolutely. Okay, so we're up to chapter 23 now.
Yes.
So, and this is another one of those kind of intense chapters, but a bit of a recap of the events leading up to it. So, first off, let's start with outside of the Citadel, back at Spitfire's Rise. Um, there's the second strike team that went to Lieutenant Lambourne's, well, what was apparently Lieutenant Lambourne's headquarters, only to find that actually that was the place where Shannon was sheltering, and she's basically been taken from there. And there was a conversation in the chapter after between Marshall and Pierce about we need to talk about Shannon, which did not confirm who she was, but did confirm that she is kind of important in the whole upper circle of Nicholas Grant's organization. And basically, they're still there. Well, they're still back at Spitfire's Rise, wondering what on earth has happened to the Underdogs. Now, out of the strike team, you've got Alex, who's still sheltering in a bungalow a couple of villages away, hoping that maybe there'll be positive contact from the Underdogs. And that actually happened just in I think it was the last chapter, second to last chapter, where Kate managed to get a phone signal, called comms, and said, "Yep, we're still alive," but actually not for much longer because Nicholas Grant basically declared to the whole Citadel that he wants us dead. Otherwise, he's going to just stop the food drops, and about 1 million people inside this Citadel would rather kill the four of us than lose all of their food. And the last we saw of the Underdogs was a gunshot being heard somewhere in the background where Ewan was trying to negotiate with the Lord. Yeah, that's not good. And the Lord's henchman storming into the toilet block and knocking out all the others, Charlie, Jack, and Kate. I think Kate's last words before the end of the chapter were, "Here we go. I'm sorry," she yelled to Raj and Lorraine. "We're dead. I love you guys. Goodbye." And that's the last we've seen of them so far. But then it went back to McCormick, who, oh yeah, and it was revealed in the last chapter that Spitfire's Rise is actually McCormick's house. Basically, he's been lying to it's just about the only lie he's ever said to the Underdogs, but that is literally for their own protection, that Spitfire's Rise, it wasn't a random house that they all found. It was his house, and he just let everyone in. And it's a good job that he's kept it to himself because, well, there's a character called Daniel Amopoulos who was referred to earlier in the book, who was captured and tortured for information he and presumably others have not been able to say where Spitfire's Rise is because they honestly don't know. But yeah, that's one of the nicer, less hurtful twists towards the end of the book. The fact that Spitfire's Rise is McCormick's place. Well, ish. There are more details to come. Anyway, so are we ready to find out what the hell happened to the strike team in the middle of the inner city with everyone trying to kill them?
Yes, please. And please let me know that the chapter we end on today does not have a cliffhanger.
Well, that's the thing. I may need to look ahead a bit and try to find one that doesn't, because we're reaching the end of the book, and
I think
we've
as
got
you progress towards the end of the book, you're leaving more and more cliffhangers for us.
absolutely rule number one about writing: give the reader a reason to keep reading.
Yes.
So we're 22 chapters in. This one's quite long and intense, and then okay, we can read 2 chapters. That's no problem. We absolutely cannot read specifically 3 chapters.
Okay. We'll keep it at two then.
We could read 4 chapters, but that literally only leaves 2. So my suggestion is that we read 2 chapters, and then next time we read all 4 of them in one go.
All right. That sounds exciting. But does that mean that
Okay.
the next session would be our last session?
The last one for Underdogs 1, yeah. I
Okay.
may or may not be open to the possibility of reading from Underdogs Tooth and Nail if there's the demand for it.
That will be awesome. That makes me happy.
Great.
My heart is happy.
Oh, and as I said earlier, I'm reading from literally my personal copy of Underdogs here, the one that's been signed by Steve Silverman after we met up for a meal, and he gave a quote for the back cover. We met up while he just happened to be in Nottingham for a speaking engagement, and he signed my book.
I saw your book, and believe it or not, I did not know Steve Silverman before. And when I read it here, and then I was like, neurotribes. And then I Googled and I was like, wow. I was living in
My
a
God,
cave.
is this a case of someone finding neotribes through Underdogs and not the other way around?
No,
Surely it's supposed to be the other way around.
I don't think, well, I mean, I found him through you. So, I mean, it is what it is, Chris.
Fair enough. Okay, so let's find out what happened to the strike team. Chapter 23. Ewan, came a whisper, accompanied by a hand patting his shoulder. It's 4. Daylight's not far away. Ewan opened his eyes, which came into focus on Patrick Rowland's smile. Oh yeah, they were shouting with the Rowlands, Patrick, Ruth, and their sons, Aidan and Benjamin. Ewan opened his eyes, which came to focus on Patrick Rowland's smile. I'd never say it out loud, thought Ewan's sleepy brain, but I'm going to miss you, Patrick. The sun usually peeked over the citadel walls around 9, but the sky brightened several hours earlier. Daylight was coming, and their assault on the outer city would be imminent. Ewan looked around to see Aidan and Benjamin waking up his friends. The Lord's armed henchmen stood at the entrance, unwilling to involve themselves. Perhaps they were unhappy with their master's orders to rescue his friends from certain death and protect them all night against threats from the public. Ewan didn't know where his idea had come from, but it had saved their lives. There were stomping, confident footsteps approaching the entrance. The Lord must have thought there was enough light to attack, or more likely, he had run out of patience. So yeah, there you go. That whole thing about storming into the toilet block and knocking them all out, that wasn't them attacking them, it was them saving them from the rest of the mob. For reasons which you're just about to find out. Time to go, he barked. Looking forward to what you promised, Private West. Ewan's lie about his military background had been exposed by Nicholas Grant's announcements, but the Lord had not seemed to mind. He had bigger priorities and bigger opportunities. A moment later, he was gone, taking his henchmen with him. Ewan, asked Kate while rubbing her eyes, what did you promise him? The chance to kill Grant's men, Ewan answered as he got to his feet. It had been the first idea Ewan could spit out in the moment. In those short seconds between the Lord raising his pistol and almost pulling the trigger, Ewan had worked out what his would-be murderer truly wanted, the chance to watch enemy soldiers die while still having the weapons at the end of it. Ewan had only needed one sentence. What if you do the killing, we escape, and you keep the weapons anyway? The Lord had dipped his weapon, and negotiations began. Ewan grinned, unable to believe his suggestion had worked. Being manipulative was one thing, but being quick-witted and manipulative had been a literal lifesaver. There's a logical side to the Lord, he continued. He knows if we escape, New London gets its food back whether we die or not. Grant wouldn't gain anything from starving his people to death. He wants control, not extermination. Then I told him where you guys could be found, and he sent his mates to rescue you. Didn't feel like a rescue, mumbled Charlie, pointing to the bruise on his jaw. And did you have to give them all the weapons? It's not like I had much say in the matter, Charlie. Ewan had tried, but his one request had resulted in a gunshot being fired past him. A bullet missing his ear by inches had been stressful enough, but the Lord had followed it with a speech that triggered his pathological demand avoidance enormously. That bullet would have killed you if I'd chosen it to, the Lord had said. From this moment, the only reason you're breathing is because I gave you permission to live. You will go through that hole unarmed, and if you don't like it, remember who your life belongs to now. That was the gunshot they heard in the background. After that, Ewan's brain had been in too much of a mess to negotiate. Even if we get inside, Charlie continued, we're dead the moment we meet our first patrol. We'll be fine, answered Jack. Once we're up there, we'll take the rifles from the dead clones' bodies. And what if there aren't any clones guarding the hole? Ewan snorted and gave no answer. Charlie was asking negative questions just for the sake of asking. So, how are we feeling? Asked Ruth from the front door. Fan-bloody-tastic, answered Ewan. Did you guys sleep okay? Asked Kate. With your big day in the morning? Said Aidan. Not a chance. Ewan felt just a twinge of love, something he had not felt much of in recent days. Against their own safety and against common sense, the Rowlands had given the Underdogs everything they could offer, from the moment they had landed in prison. They had even pleaded their way into spending the night alongside them, out of nothing but loyalty. You don't have to put yourselves out like this, you know. Why not? Asked Benjamin. We know we may not be part of your army, but we're in this together. United by our differences, right? United, answered Ewan, trying to hide his confusion. Aidan walked to the far wall, beckoning for his brother to follow. Benjamin smiled at the team before leaving them alone, and Ewan took his chance to whisper. Someone taught them our motto? I did, answered Jack. No point in saying united by our differences unless we share it with people who are different to us. There was no denying Jack's logic, and once his possessive thoughts subsided, Ewan realised how little he minded. He looked over to the Rowlands, who would have been miles away from the battleground if they'd had any common sense. Most other people would have been. You'd have been welcome in McCormick's army, he thought towards the family. Give me a second, just switching on the lights. When the Lord wanted something, there was no denying his efficiency. Ewan's team had been given perfect accommodation right next to the hole. After the original slaughter, the survivors had spent minutes mourning their dead neighbours, then hours harvesting the remains of their shelters. The Lord had found the shack with the biggest extension and scared its owners away for the night. Ewan stood next to the shelter's exit and tried to judge the distance to the wall. At the first sound of gunfire, the sleeping locals would awake to see his team making a break with the ladder, a thick wooden board with crude footholds broken off the Rowland's roof. Unless Ewan and his friends were quick, the hunt would be short and painful. Outside, the Lord and his 4 henchmen were positioned atop their roofs, weapons in hands and grins on faces. It would not be long. Charlie, Ewan said, happy birthday, mate. 1 year closer to death and all that. Cheers, his friend answered with a well-humoured grin. You know what's weird? I'm finally old enough to join the army now. Yeah, in the British Army, you need to be at least 16, and it's literally Charlie's 16th birthday, which he's been showing off about through most of the book because he's Charlie. Ewan smiled and walked over to Kate at the far window. Her stare seemed unfocused. Someone was on her mind, and he didn't think it was Raj. Oh yeah, another thing, Kate and Raj are going out, and that was revealed in previous chapters. Just concentrate on yourself, Ewan whispered. Trust me. Kate looked across at him, almost offended by the suggestion. I never realised how many people look like him, she whispered. Oh yeah, she's talking about James, her brother. Older brother with complex learning disabilities. I've never realised how many people look like him, she whispered. I've seen his face a dozen times in the crowd, but every one of them ended up being a stranger. And now I'm abandoning my brother again, just to keep myself safe. You'll do more good for him out there than in here. Hardly makes it easier, does it? Ewan took a step towards Kate, who allowed him to give her a hug. He made it as brief and non-emotive as he could. She would need her wits about her. Jack was at the rear of the house, waiting for Ewan to approach. Don't ask me how I am, he whispered once Ewan was next to him. Tell me how you are. Jack was trustworthy enough. Ewan checked around him for listeners, and found none. I'm probably the most scared of all of us, he whispered. I set up this deal. If this goes wrong, your blood's on my hands. Not Grant's, then? He could always rely on Jack to be blunt and logical. In fact, sometimes that Asperger's-style bluntness was just what he needed. Oh yeah, this book came out in 2019, just before Asperger's fell out of favour. I'm pretty certain the reprint says autism-style bluntness, but his diagnosis is still Asperger's syndrome because it just literally is. I mean, mine is. But references to Asperger's have changed to autism in the reprints. We could have died in that corridor 3 days ago, said Ewan. Instead, we lived, and prisoners died. If we get killed this morning, our extra 3 days on Earth will have cost dozens of lives for no reason. Best not die then. Chin up, mate. Hey, interrupted a gruff voice at the door. You ready for this? The Lord stood with the podcopter minigun under one arm, grinning like a child about to meet Santa. Ready when you are, answered Ewan. Better make this worth it. Apparently the murder rate exploded last night. Everyone's killing their neighbours and dressing them in black to look like you guys. Getting hungry, I guess. They'll get their food back. Just get us through that wall. With pleasure. The Lord looked for the roof and lifted himself up with a single arm. When the footsteps on the ceiling above stopped, Ewan took a long sigh. Everyone line up, he said. His friends formed a queue at the shelter's exit, Ewan at the back. Usually leadership meant being first in line, but sometimes it meant putting your friends first. Guys, said Aidan as he exited the shack. All the best. Aidan, you okay there? Came Benjamin's voice beside him. Yeah. Ewan felt a sudden stillness in the atmosphere. Aidan's foul-mooded response had not gone unnoticed, nor had the tone of Benjamin's words. Even Ewan West, the worst people reader in New London, had detected it. The brothers knew something. Give them fiery hell! Screamed the Lord from the rooftop above. The wooden boards on the wall crumbled against the spray of the minigun. The Lord's barrage of bullets chopped them to 1,000 splinters and sent a flood of wet concrete spilling out onto the ground below. A second layer of wood was chipped away to reveal the grey corridors of the outer city. As a troop of surprised clones rushed to the newly opened window, the Lord's henchmen joined the chaos and opened fire with their assault rifles. There was anger and laughter in their screams. They had dreamt for 11 months about a meaningful protest against their oppressors, and now had enough weapons to make their point. One of the angrier clones, leaning too far out of the hole as the bullets passed through his head, fell to the floor of the inner city like an unstringed puppet. The weapon that replaced his right forearm was dark green, and the LED on its side flickered off. Ewan's heart almost stopped. Oh no, muttered Charlie. Bio rifles, snarled Ewan. We are so screwed. What's wrong? Asked Patrick. Marshall invented weapons, Pierce did genetic engineering. The bio rifle's the only thing they made together. The guns are wired into their owners. When the clone dies, the weapon dies. Another body fell to the ground, with a similar green forearm and a blank LED. Grant's planned for this, finished Ewan. He knew our ammo wouldn't last in here. Those bioguns cost a ton of resources, so there's not many of them, but he's chosen the perfect time to bring them out. There would be no weapons available on the other side, but it was better to be unarmed in the walls than unarmed in the prison. Ewan let out a rallying cry, picked up his end of the makeshift ladder, and his friends charged into the breaking light. They steadied the ladder next to the fallen clones and secured its top rung against the hole in the wall. Aidan Rowland, architect extraordinaire, had calculated the ladder's length to perfection. The last of the clones fell silent, and Kate began to climb. Around them, the locals stirred. Goodbye, Inn in New London, Ewan snarled as he gripped the side of the ladder. Screw you and everything you did to us. Ewan followed his friends upward and through the laser cannon hole, ignorant of the cuts on his hands from the chipped wood and the stains of wet concrete, and fell into the warmth of the outer city corridors. The inside of the citadel walls had never felt so welcoming. The relief faded when he looked at the dozen dead clones and saw not one usable firearm among them. Ewan had only one idea, to poke his head back into the inner city prison and plead with the Lord for just one weapon, just a handgun, something. He looked back through the hole, just in time to see it happen. Benjamin leapt up and grabbed the side of the nearest roof with one hand. Then with the other, he brought out a sharpened length of corrugated iron and slashed Gareth's calf. When the screaming henchman fell on his back, Benjamin aimed the tip with millimetre precision and stabbed him through the neck. Benjamin, what the hell are you doing? Gareth's body fell to the concrete without complaint, and Benjamin leapt onto the roof. Aidan held up his hands as his brother tossed one of Gareth's rifles down to him, and then vanished behind the walls. Ewan suspected he was running to the other side of the battleground to open up a second front. Potts opened fire towards Benjamin, his aim enraged and approximate. Ruth was screaming, asking her sons why. Aidan shouted something about getting weapons for the Underdogs. Ewan struggled with the conflicting thoughts in his mind, wanting the Rowlands to be safe, yet urgently needing firearms. He watched Patrick and Ruth's horrified faces as Benjamin Rowland, a harmless young lawyer in the old days, killed a second human being. He grabbed Gareth's assault rifle and used it to shoot Dave. None of them had seen the Lord as he turned around with a minigun and opened fire into Benjamin's chest. Ewan felt a hollowness in his own torso as Benjamin's back started to spit blood. The vengeful young man turned into a falling corpse, which toppled out of view somewhere onto the concrete ground. Benjamin! Patrick screamed. He ran out of sight, Aidan's gunfire distracting Sean and Potts from taking aim. Ewan watched in fearful amazement as Patrick defied his age and climbed onto the rooftop behind the Lord. There, the bed and breakfast owner from Croydon engaged in combat against a murderous gangster with an M134 minigun. Ewan admired Patrick's bravery, but it was clear he had no plan beyond wrapping his arms around the Lord's neck. Ewan's scream could not be heard as Potts, unwilling to fire a bullet in the direction of his master, leapt across the gap between the rooftops and plunged a knife into Patrick's spine. No, Ewan yelled, suppressing the need to vomit. What's going on? Asked Kate. Ewan didn't answer. He gazed over to Aidan, who staggered over Sean's dead body with blood pouring from his neck. Ewan had not seen how Sean had died, nor why Aidan was wounded, but the details made no difference. Aidan used his last moments of life to empty his bullets across New London, some of which found their way into Potts. Both bodies fell, and the Lord ran out of henchmen. Ruth appeared around the corner of the shelter, unarmed, just in time to watch the Lord finish off her husband. The minigun bullets ripped through Patrick's chest at point-blank range, and his body collapsed onto the corrugated roof. Ewan's vision turned blurry as tears formed in his eyes. He watched them away and saw Ruth cowering in the street, set to be the Lord's final target. She didn't seem to care. Her whole family was gone. It was not the terror of a deer in headlights that kept Ruth in place, but the acceptance of the lamb led to the slaughter. In the corner of Ewan's eyesight, something grabbed Jack's foot. Ewan leapt in fright. He had almost forgotten his own corridor even existed, and he looked down at the almost dead body of a clone soldier. One of the patrol was still alive, and determined to murder at least one of Grant's enemies before the end. Guys, help! Jack yelled, his hand wrestling against the bi-rifle that was loosely aimed towards his face. A good man named Joseph McCormick had spent 11 months teaching Ewan how to take control of his anger issues, but at that moment, anger was the only response he knew how to give. Anger at the slaughter of decent people. Anger at his role in the Roland's deaths. Anger that, even now, some crappy clone soldier is trying to murder his friends. Ewan's temper twin instincts resurfaced, and he leapt with a year of suppressed rage at the surviving clone. He wrapped his hands around the bi-rifle, jerked it away from Jack's head, and dragged the clone towards the hole. As angry as Ewan was, he knew what he was doing. It was a skill he had never learned back at Oakenfold, the ability to feel angry but remain capable of thought. He forced the clone's arm in the direction he wanted to aim, and pinched his fingers against one of the bullet wounds. The clone flinched, the bi-rifle fired, and a glob of blood left the Lord's throat. The Lord's aim fell away from Ruth, and he twisted his wobbling head towards the hole in the wall. Ewan pinched again, and another bullet punctured the Lord's stomach. The third pinch had no impact. The LED on the bi-rifle had gone out, and Clone was dead. But the first two bullets were enough. Ewan's eyes met the Lord's in a shared moment of hatred. Then Paul Green, former painter decorator turned mass murderer, fell to the rooftop and ceased to breathe. That makes two. Two humans dead through my actions. Oh yeah, you still don't know who the first person was. Deliberately. He was a monster, though. He shouldn't count as human like she did. But that's how it begins, Ewan. When you stop seeing people as human, you let anything happen to them. Ewan glanced around the prison. The gunfire had stopped, and heads started to poke out from doors and windows. Hungry prisoners were a short run from the firearms that littered the battleground, and the ladder to the city walls. Ruth, Ewan yelled, in the closest voice he could manage to sympathy. We don't have much time. The shell of a woman that was once Ruth Roland started to move slowly. Heads in the doorways became whole bodies. Come on, Ruth, if you don't give us something, your family died for nothing. She reached up to the low roof and plucked the minigun from the Lord's dead hand. She was the first prisoner to the ladder and was 4 rungs up when the next prisoner began to follow. A steady stream of armed escapees formed a queue behind her, yelping in excitement. Ruth came within arm's reach and held up the minigun. Ewan seized it before Patrick's blood could drip off his barrel onto her weakening hands. I'm so sorry. I don't want your apologies, Ruth gasped. Ewan thought those were her words anyway. It was difficult to tell through the trauma in her voice. Come back here one day and tear this place apart. Make this, hurry up, you old hag, came a yell from an impatient prisoner a few rungs below. Ewan stopped breathing. These prisoners had never seen the outer city before and couldn't have known it would be even more dangerous than the prison. The chop, chop, chop of approaching podcopters sounded in the distance. There was only one option. Thank you, Ruth, said Ewan as kindly as he could. Now hold on tight. Ruth obeyed, and with gritted teeth, Ewan pushed the ladder until it toppled. He watched as Ruth and the rest of the prisoners fell to the concrete below, and the ladder hit the nearest roof and snapped in half. Insults were hurled at Ewan like rotten fruit from prisoners who honestly believed they could have escaped and lived. He switched off any sorrow that crept into his head, turned his back on the hole and sprinted down the corridor, minigun in hand. Straight for the exit, yelled Charlie as he tried to catch up. No, Ewan screamed back. Not yet. Not yet? Why the hell not? Ewan slowed down to wait for Kate and Jack, who were equally confused. We just spent 3 days in hell, said Ewan, and a load of people died because of it. If we don't complete our mission, it was all for nothing. There were no objection on his friends' faces. They worked out what his next sentence would be, and they all agreed. Let's burn that clone factory to the ground. End of chapter 23.
Two things. Intense. And there's this one part where Jack said something, and I really liked it. United by our differences, unless we share it with people, no point in saying that. That was
Yes. Yeah, thank you.
I'm missing Rofe here in this because his favorite slogan is "United by our differences." He writes it everywhere and then tags you. He loves United, but I mean, I do too. But Rofe, he's another level. He loves that. So I wish he was here. If you're listening to this, Rofe, we miss you.
Yes, I hope you watch this on catch up because you don't want to miss that chapter.
Oh no, he doesn't. I think by now he does have a copy of this book. I think he might have finished it. But
wow.
I hope he hasn't. Hopefully we'll see him in next session and then we'll finish the book together.
Oh yes, the final 4 chapters are no, it's not a cycling shirt. It's a UK Cubing Championship shirt, but I do have a very similar-ish, other than the logo on the front. But one of my Sonic shirts does look kind of like this, if you can only see the top of it. But yeah, the last 4 chapters, they are. There's a reason why I want to read all 4 of them at once. You just can't read 2 and then the other 2.
I feel like having a book party for the last 4 chapters, like inviting some of our people in, a few people from your side, a few people from my side, and then kind of like a book reading party. How does that sound?
Absolutely.
All right, chapter 24.
Okay. Okay, so I think this is the last chapter that doesn't end with a cliffhanger, except maybe or maybe not the last one. I'm not going to say anything about that, but it's the last place where we could possibly reasonably take a break. Chapter 24. They did not take long to find the first platoon, and one spray from the podcopter's weapon ripped them to pieces. Ewan ran to their remains and plucked the assault rifles from the mess. 4 of the 6 weapons had avoided damage. He picked them up and threw them out to his team like sweets at a pantomime. Okay, we're armed, he said. Not much left in the minigun, though. Definitely not worth carrying, with my arm the way it is. He checked his forearm again and swore under his breath. The weight of the gun had split the wound, and a build-up of runny pus had spilled over his skin. Oh yeah, the podcopter wound that Ewan got way back in chapter 13. Yeah, he's gonna need some disinfectant for that, otherwise he's lost his arm, or maybe his life. Cover your ears, guys, he said. I'm emptying it into the ground so it can't be used against us. No way, said Jack. 3/4 of the Rolands died for us to have those bullets. If you won't take her, I will. Ewan pushed away the realization that he was being commanded and held the weapon out towards his friend. Jack slung the rifle over one shoulder and tried to work out how best to carry a 2-handed minigun. A moment later, voices cried out from the cloned radios. One of the voices must have been Ian Marshall. Ewan could tell by the authority in his voice, authority which relied on volume and anger, like so many bad teachers from his mainstream days. No, I don't care how many of you are feeling cranky. This morning, shift hours don't matter. I need one of you to send a team to keep the prisoners contained, and the rest of you to rally some troops and send them rebel hunting. We don't have long before they escape. Another voice entered the fray, a weasel-like tone that sounded like someone who'd never stepped outside the evil lab they were born in. You think they'll just flee? There's plenty they could do to us at 4 a.m. if your men are as unprepared as you say. You told Nick yet? You can bloody tell him. Ewan looked up, and found a sight he had not witnessed since their sleepover in Lemsford. All of his friends were smiling. It was always fun listening to enemies as they snapped at each other in panic. Keep Floor's Head well guarded just in case, said the voice that was probably Nathaniel Pierce. In the meantime, everyone keep close to your radios. The moment someone reports activity, Marshall will send in his biggest weapon. Don't give me commands, Nat. Don't you dare. The conversation descended into bickering. It was no longer worth Ewan's time. I love the fact that I only just noticed this now. I don't think this is even deliberate. But on the first page of this, Jack gives Ewan something that's essentially a command, and Ewan pushes his emotions to one side and says, "Yes, Jack, you're right. Have this gun." Nathaniel Pierce kind of indirectly gives in Marshall a command, and he can't handle it. Yeah, the more you see as the series goes on of the relationship between Ian Marshall and Oliver Roth, the more you know that Ian Marshall was supposed to be the he's an arms dealer and an evil man, and he commanded everyone on Takeover Day, but he's the one who's supposed to be keeping his emotions in check. But he has his weaknesses. Right, he said. Teams of 2. Charlie, you stay with me. Splitting up? Asked Jack. Really? Yeah, you and Kate hit the factory. Charlie and I will cause a distraction. We'll find the nearest officer sector and go hunting for info. Info on what? Asked Kate. Doesn't matter. We'll get there before you get to floor F. Once they detect us, all eyes will be on us instead of you. Info on what? Repeated Kate, demanding eye contact as strongly as she could bear. If you're attacking Marshall's biggest weapon, it better be for something good. Sorry, if you're attracting Marshall's biggest weapon, it better be for something good. Info on Shannon, for starters, answered Ewan. Who she is, where she came from, how she knows so much. Then there's the list she was carrying. I want to know what else they've found out about us. Jack, pass me the combination hacker. The officer sector will have a code. You can keep everything else. Jack reached into the rucksack, found the combination hacker, and passed it over. Have fun, guys, finished Ewan. Charlie, pass them the memory stick. You remember the USB stick that Shannon, what basically the whole thing was about. Charlie, pass them the memory stick. Charlie reached into his left-hand pocket. After a few moments of spreading his fingers around, he started to dig deeper. A look of abject horror spread across his face as he pulled his empty hand back out. It's not in my pocket. Ewan's body lost all its feeling, and his jaw fell open. It's in my other pocket, Charlie said with a grin, reaching into his right-hand pocket and waving Shannon's memory stick between his fingers.
That's exactly what my elder son would do. That's exactly what Yassine would do, seriously.
Thanks. Charlie, don't be an ass, said Ewan, snatching it from his hand and passing it over to Kate. It was pretty funny, to be fair, laughed Jack. Whatever. You can let bear get going. It's a long way to floor F. Jack handed the rucksack to Kate. The minigun alone must have been heavy enough. Good luck, both of you, said Kate. It's never luck, said Ewan. Enjoy the destruction. He couldn't help but feel a twinge of envy as Kate and Jack set off. The death of the clone factory would be a joy to behold. But he would serve the mission better as the live target. It had worked with the laser cannon, after all. Ewan brought out his phone and switched it on as he started to run. Charlie, time me. Sure, but why don't we take one of those clone radios? We could listen in. They're GPS tracked. We want to give them clues about where we are, not tell them. Ewan found the stairwell entrance by the time the phone had powered up. Charlie checked the second hand on his watch. 3 minutes. Go. 3 minutes to tell comms we're alive, deal with the emotions of talking to them again, ask for directions, and memorize them. Easy. The phone rang. Barely a moment passed before a voice answered, with a joyous tone like a dead man raised back to life. Hello? Asked McCormick, his face appearing on screen a moment later. For a moment, Ewan choked on his own breath. He had not gone for 3 days without McCormick since Takeover Day. A whole world ago. Sir? Ewan? There was a short, magical moment where neither Ewan nor McCormick could string a sentence together, and were content to watch each other's faces and listen to each other's silence. Then Charlie pointed at his watch, and Ewan tried to force the conversation forward. Sir, I've got so much to tell you, but it'll have to wait until we're back home. Raj told me you'd probably died. No, we're in the walls now, all 4 of us, and we need help. Tell me where you are, and I'll direct you to the exit. Alex is still close by, so I'll get him to help from the outside. No, not yet. Give me the nearest officer's sector to stairwell 59. There was a moment's silence as McCormick's off-screen companion rustled through a collection of maps. It must have been Gracie, going by the passive tone of her voice. Charlie opened the door to the stairwell, and Ewan followed him inside. So what's the plan? Asked McCormick. By the sounds of it, you're not doing the sensible thing and escaping. Just heard Marshall and Pierce on the radio. They're expecting a break-in, so me and Charlie are giving them one. And while they're looking for us, Jack and Kate, he looked up and down the stairwell. They were probably alone, but the risk wasn't worth it. They're preparing for better days. I understand, said McCormick. Oh yeah, Shannon's USB stick was called Better Days, for those who've forgotten. It was another part of Ewan that made him feel like a walking contradiction. Despite struggling with everyone else's hints, he was adept at dropping his own. Gracie leaned into the camera's field of vision and whispered to McCormick. Her voice was too quiet to decipher, as if she didn't think herself worthy of giving instructions to the team. She was the kind of girl who waited for the adults to get her equipment out of her pencil case each lesson. And they did it too. But now the adult support has gone, independence is hardly a thing. Floor S, said McCormick. Not far at all. Now listen carefully. Paragraph break. Ewan took the third right as instructed. If McCormick and Gracie were correct, there would be one more corner than a 200-metre sprint to the security door. Ewan had often wondered what the insides of the officer sector looked like. Those fabled humans-only areas must have held a luxury or two. Kate, he whispered into his radio. Updates? Not even halfway up the stairwell, she answered. Seriously? Hey, gasped Jack. Have you ever tried lugging a minigun up 20 flights of stairs? Charlie dashed around the corner and fired a shot for each clone on guard. Not long after their bodies had fallen, he and Ewan reached the security door. Keep us posted, guys, Ewan said, raising the door combination hacker and slapping it over the dialing pad before him. A press of the power button revealed 8 blank spaces on its miniature screen, and a jumble of changing numbers flashed in front of his eyes. You know, I'd love to know the science behind those things, said Charlie behind him. Dad wasn't a technician, answered Ewan. He just swiped it from the barracks with the thermal blocker and a bunch of other things. All I know is that when the numbers freeze, it's good. Ewan stared at the screen before him and let out an impatient huff. All the spy movies of his youth had told him that secure gateways could be hacked and unlocked in just one camera shot, but his own experience had never matched that. You got a minute to talk? Asked Charlie. Could have between 5 and 10. Better watch those corridors, mate. We passed at least 2 cameras on the way here. Yeah. Anyway, I was just wondering something. The 5th digit along froze on 3. The other digits kept going. So it was PDA after all that? Asked Charlie. What? All that secrecy for so long. Then Grant just announced it to New London. Can't remember what words he used, but I know he meant PDA. What does it stand for again? Oh yeah, for most of the book, Ewan has kept his PDA like a really dark secret that he wouldn't even tell his temper twin. And Charlie had just outright asked him earlier, like right at the beginning of the mission, and he said, "Oh, I'll tell you when we're back home." And well, that didn't happen. Ewan focused his face against the hacker in an effort to hide the anger on his face. There was no longer a way to avoid the conversation he had put off for years. Pathological demand avoidance, he snarled. Means he can't take instructions well. Other people's orders make me anxious. So that's why McCormick made you head soldier. It's not that I like leadership, Charlie, Ewan said with a sigh. It's just how I avoid feeling threatened. I can't even handle orders I give to myself. Get up, get dressed, and so on. Teachers told me to do things at primary school, and I got so nervous I threw chairs and tables. All the kids told me I wasn't allowed on the muddy fields, so I kicked the crap out of them. Keith Tyler, the assassin from chapter 1, he almost made me lose it when he was holding Shannon. He told me he was in charge, and he must have known my weakness all along. But you're fine with McCormick ordering you about? Asked Charlie. That's what trust does. My trust in him and his trust in me. Just the way he acts and talks. He commands without commanding, if that makes sense. Ewan paused as he started to understand exactly what McCormick had done to him. Ewan had never considered himself a leader, but was not capable of following either. By all rights, teamwork should have been beyond him. Instead, if he ever met his younger self, he might have recognised the Ewan Westman takeover day, but only in the literal sense. The two had little in common beyond appearance. Nobody ever trusted me like McCormick did, Ewan continued. He actually gave me chances to show what I could do. Before him, people weren't interested in that. If they kept me from exploding, their job was done. Oakenfold wasn't bad, but the 6 schools before it, they saw my PDA as a problem, not a personality trait. Well, let's be honest, said Charlie with a daring laugh. Ewan ignored him and continued. Even the name screams problem, pathological demand avoidance. Pathology means disease, you know. It's like they're telling me my brain is diseased and then they criticize me for not acting like normal people or for getting anxious when they order me around. I'm not a control freak or anything. I just feel helpless when other people make my decisions for me. They don't realize it feels like my free will is under attack. Or Ewan halted his sentence before he sounded too vulnerable. The point had been made and he had confessed enough. He looked at the miniature screen and found 3 of the 8 digits in place. Has to be said, though, he continued in an attempt to change the subject. Getting over this mission is going to take some time. After 11 months of living with you guys, I've forgotten how crap the general public really are. 4 digits. Because of the whole trying to kill us thing? Asked Charlie. You can't hold that against them. It's hard to have faith in normal people when most of them wanted us dead. 5. Then 6 a moment later. Yeah, right, answered Charlie. You think they ganged up on us just because they missed lunch? There were still kids left in there. Some people would have been parents. They were trying to kill us for the ones they love. I know it's difficult to understand when we're the victims, but, well, it's not like we've never been hated before, is it? What on earth's happening to you, Charlie? Ewan thought. How are you suddenly getting all compassionate and understanding? Oh, one more page and then we're done for tonight. You're right, Ewan said, but it will be a few days before I believe it, if you know what I mean. 7 digits down, 1 to go. Ewan checked his watch in surprise. His equipment had chosen the perfect day to act fast. Right, he said. We're about to venture where no clone has ever been. Deal with the bodies, mate, and don't prop them up on bloody chairs this time, like you did in something like Chapter 10, which didn't quite work. Ewan lowered his gaze to the dead clones and found 2 expanding red pools growing from underneath them. His mind was invaded by the image of a similar blood pool seeping across the inner city, fed at that moment by the leaking bodies of the Rolands and the Lord's men. We can't hide them inside, said Charlie. Anyone passing will see the blood. Give me a sec. Ewan heard the sound of running footsteps, looked up and found Charlie halfway down the corridor. Charlie? Charlie turned around, checked the soles of his shoes and jogged back. At Ewan's side, an LED lit up next to the completed 8-digit code. Ewan removed the hacker from its position as Charlie arrived back, only to charge off again in a completely different direction. Mate, what the hell are you doing? Look at the ground, you numpty. Ewan did so and saw 2 convincing trails of blood prints, each running away from the scene of a crime. He smiled. If we can't hide the bodies, might as well use them, said Charlie. They'll think we finished here and ran off already. That might work. Okay, prepare yourself. Ewan dialed in the numbers and was rewarded with a buzz. A smirk crept across the corner of his lips as the door swung open, and he peered into a world that nobody beyond Grant's inner circle was supposed to see. End of chapter 24, out of 28. I think you're on mute.
I always
Hello
do
again.
that to myself. I'm so sorry. I like where it ended.
Thank you. Yeah. In the next chapter, you'll see why we couldn't have stopped there. And the chapter after that, you'll know why we couldn't have stopped there.
It feels
And
like,
the next one's the penultimate chapter, and the one after that's the ending. So,
well,
yeah, I'm sorry, Steph, that is not a cliffhanger by the standards you've been used to throughout the rest of the
it's
book.
a very less intense. It's not an intense cliffhanger.
Yeah,
It
it's
feels like
basically.
I'm sorry, what?
I was about to say it's basically setting up what's going to happen rather than something has happened. What's going on? It's you've got Jack and Kate who are running up to the clone factory control room to try and destroy it. And got Ewan and Charlie sneaking into the officer sector to basically do an information raid and try and find out who the hell Shannon is. And that is setting up 2 things that are just about to happen, which is suppose it's. I don't think, to me, it counts as a cliffhanger because you do know what's going on. Which I don't know. What's the definition of a cliffhanger? Yeah, I suppose if Ewan had opened the door and then been shot straight away, and then the chapter ended, that would have been a cliffhanger. And even then, but then there's some mystery to that because maybe I don't consider this much of a cliffhanger because the reader knows what the plan is. Whether the plan actually goes to plan or not depends on the next following chapters, but at least you know where the characters are, what they're doing, and what they intend to get from it.
I feel like the characters are in a good position here. So that kind of like makes me feel a little satisfied and at peace that okay, they're all safe right now. They all have a plan, and they're, very near towards the end of this. And hopefully we'll be in a winning position. So like my mind is making up all different versions of the story of what's gonna happen next. And
You know what? Let's have some fun. Everyone predict what you think is going to happen in the next 4 chapters.
oh my god, that's fun. Okay. I think it's mine's going to be pretty simple. I think that they're simply going to be in the winning position, and they'll find that switch where they can turn the clone factory off. Uh, and then I feel like it's going to be all good at the end. But knowing you, I know that I'm being very optimistic. So I don't know. I'd like to believe that that is going to happen. But knowing you, and since there are other parts of the book, a part of me is thinking that can't happen. So I don't know. Steph, do you have any predictions?
Let me check the comments of the Facebook post because I've seen the ones that have been. Here we go. I've seen the ones that have been pasted on StreamYard, but I've not actually seen the live yet. Let's take a look.
I think I've been posting all the comments here on SteamYard. I hope I haven't missed any.
Yeah. Okay. 16 comments. So. Okay, well, obviously, I'm keeping a complete and total poker face about what you just said and what your prediction is, but yeah.
This is what Steph
Okay, I don't see any comments on that. Oh, here we go. They won't be able to destroy the clone factory, otherwise there wouldn't be 3 more books.
said. Well,
Hmm,
maybe there's something else in the new books, and maybe they'll
maybe.
find out, yeah, and maybe they'll find that out after they find that switch and turn it off, and then they find it. Oh, so this wasn't the main thing. I don't know. I mean, that might happen, right? Okay, Chris, say something.
United by our differences.
United by our differences. All right. Well, this was a great session. Um,
Hmm.
this was kind of like I was on a long break. Chris was busy with a lot of things, all good things though. Um, I am going to post the link for Chris's book later on our page, on our social media. And Chris, if you could please send me the image of the book and all that, that will be great. So we can plan out
Sure.
a post for that. And Chris is, I think, not available next week for our book party session, but I would like to plan the last session and give it some time to let everyone know so that we can have a good party for Underdogs One. So I am thinking towards the third week of September. Chris, would you be available then?
That would be Wednesday, 20th September, yeah?
All right, let's plan for 20th September, same time, around 12:30 or
Underdogs
12.
finale.
Yes, Underdogs finale. Well, and we're gonna try having a couple of games as well and a couple of prizes. Maybe to kick off our second session of the book reading, we can offer the Underdogs 2 to a couple of attendees. And yeah, we'll plan something out. You guys will have a lot of fun. But that being said, I think I think that was all we had to add. Chris, is there something that any update or anything that you'd like to share?
Well, no, can't think so. We've already talked about Alfie Smith's Speed Cuba. What you love most about life is going to be precedent given to the distributor on approximately September 13th, day before my birthday actually, and then from there it's going to be sent out to everyone who ordered it. Not literally everyone. I don't have the budget for that. And then there's Underdogs Uprising, which same updates as before. Really, the interior is almost completely complete, and the official release date for the final Underdogs book is next February. But everyone who pre-ordered, I'm campaigning for them to get even if just the digital version as early as possible, and it's not actually that far off.
I'm really excited for that one, by the way. I'm really, really looking forward to it. Well, anyhow, thank you so much, Chris, for taking the time out. And thank you to everyone who's going to be watching it later on YouTube. And special thanks to everyone who was here right now participating with us. And I am really excited about this upcoming book party that we're going to have with Chris. And we'll keep sharing updates regarding the future planned book reading session. Oh, my voice is echoing. All right. Anyway, thank you, everyone. Take care. We're going to end the live session now and broadcast.